There it is. Okay. So, do you have any questions or comments before we start, or we just go ahead and begin with the web? No te escucho. Tienes el micrófono cerrado.
¿Cómo está, profe? Qué pena. Bueno, profe, yo quería hacerle como las preguntas con base al desarrollo de la fase número 3, porque en la recomendación anterior usted me decía como vincular el contenido. Mm, Esa fue en la segunda fase, pero en la tercera fase le quería preguntar como si se pudo vincular, si se dio el resultado obtenido, porque pues ya en esta fase ya ha ido avanzando un poco más, y ha ido como teniendo un poco más las ideas más centrales, entonces quería como preguntarle eso para esta nueva fase que ya estamos buscando la final, si se está dando como la ruta, si me estoy encaminando. Profe,
Permíteme, yo abro. Sí, no, es que estaba prendiendo el micrófono. Permíteme, yo reviso el campus y
sí,
conversamos frente a lo que has avanzado y cómo se ha desarrollado, ¿vale? Mm,
bueno, profe, muchas
Ok,
gracias.
un gusto.
Te veo como pixelada, ¿será la señal?
Sí, debe ser la señal. Voy
Mm,
a apagar la cámara a ver si mejora un poquito porque está
sí,
lloviendo
señor.
mucho donde yo vivo. Entonces, de pronto es el
Ah,
internet. Entonces, sí, voy a apagar la
bueno,
cámara
bueno,
para ver si
profesor.
mejora. ¿Listo?
Claro que sí.
Ok, perfecto. Entonces, por acá veo pues que tú fuiste la primera que avanzó en la actividad.
Sí,
Eh,
señora.
veo que, veo que pues ahí han tratado de colaborar, que veo que un compañero empezó. Bien, frente a la vinculación de los temas, yo creo que de la actividad anterior a la que estamos revisando ahora, has mejorado mucho y has logrado alcanzar el propósito, ¿sí?
Sí,
Entonces, sí, hemos encontrado una mejoría en la vinculación la, de los conceptos que son importantes. Yo creo que ya en esta fase que estamos, hemos madurado mucho el concepto de currículo, hemos madurado mucho el concepto de los principios del currículo y qué nos está guiando. ¿Qué hace que nuestro aprendizaje o nuestros estudiantes sean más independientes? La importancia de un currículo innovador, pero que también mire al estudiante como el centro del aprendizaje. Entonces, yo veo que hay muy buena vinculación, sí.
perfecto, profe. Pues esa era como mi idea, porque en realidad el trabajo en este momento, el del 24, ya lo tengo casi finalizado. Yo le estoy trabajando como casi todas las noches y estoy esperando como que mis compañeros vayamos aportando. Pero quería como conocer precisamente como eso, profe, sobre la etapa 3, qué tanto he avanzado, si estoy buscando si estoy encontrando como el rumbo correcto. Y ya, pues ese es como el objetivo de la reunión, profe, no sé qué retroalimentación me quiera brindar.
Ok, vamos a revisar acá. Voy a revisar entonces el, el Canva que subiste.
Sí,
Aquí veo que una compañera contribuyó. Vamos a ver, vamos a mirar por acá cómo está el Canva.
lo hice en mapa conceptual, profe.
Ujú. Está bien,
Ujú.
está bien. A ver, principles, ok. Access management, they promote curricula. Ujú. Bien. Lo único que tengo para aportar referente al mapa como tal es que veo en algunas partes de pronto donde está, dice independent work y tú tienes, quería preguntarte cuál es el significado. ¿Tienes un corchete, es como un bracket y un cuadro abajito?
Sí,
Entonces, y también lo tienes en collaborative work. Y también, bueno, todos están así, con el corchete, excepto, bueno, los principles no. Básicamente son los Learning and Knowledge Technologies, Independent Learning and Collaborative Work. ¿Cuál es el propósito de
yes.
separar esa información?
Pues en realidad lo quise hacer así porque ellos nos hablan como, em, como que esos son los ejemplos, los objetivos específicos, ¿cierto? Y quería dar como un ejemplo específico de todo lo que ellos nos están hablando. Em, Básicamente eso, profe, quería como separar ejemplos de
Ujú.
objetivos.
Entiendo.
No sé si así está bien. O los dejo solamente con objetivos quito los ejemplos.
No, yo creo que los ejemplos están muy relevantes que nos complementan la información. Entonces, lo
Sí.
que yo quería saber era precisamente cuál era el objeto de tener esta división, tal vez aclarar dentro de la presentación cuál es el de los objetivos y cuál es el que son los ejemplos, como con una pequeñita palabra
Mm,
introductoria para que una el
ok.
concepto, porque está un poco abstracto y el mapa conceptual pues me tiene que hablar por sí solo. Entonces, allí hay un aspecto a mejorar.
Ok, perfecto.
Sería solamente eso lo que observo.
Listo, profe. Perfecto. Profe, también quería hacer una pregunta, pues en realidad la aplicación de Canva ha sido muy útil, pero me gustaría como conocer o explorar otras aplicaciones. No sé si usted me puede como guiar, como cuál
Yo he,
pueda buscar.
ok, yo he utilizado Genially, que me gusta mucho también. Genially es muy chévere. Y hay otra que yo utilizo, espérame un momentito, ¿cómo se llama? Em, Otra que se llama Wix.
Ok.
Y ellas también son muy interactivas, muy inductivas, te van llevando en el proceso, entonces pudieras aprender allí muy bien. Hay otras, por ejemplo, que si tú quieres hacer mapas conceptuales o mentales, hay una que se
Ujú.
llama Piro. Y la aplicación Miro, la página Miro, tiene la posibilidad de hacer infografías, de hacer mapas mentales, mapas conceptuales, inclusive te puede ayudar para estudiar los conceptos y hacer mejor adquisición del tema. Hola,
Pro- Profe, te escucho
entrecortado.
muy pausado.
Ok,
Sí, sí, profe.
ya
Se nos
volví.
fue la señal un poquito. Sí, sí, sí.
Bueno, listo. Te decía que la aplicación Miro es muy buena. Se escribe así, Miro, como en
Sí.
español. Es muy buena para hacer mapas mentales, infografías y para hacer resumen de información. Entonces, te
Mm,
puede ayudar.
ok.
Sí, entonces esas son las que
Mm.
yo más manejo. Me parece que de todas las que yo he utilizado para hacer mapas mentales, Miro me parece la más intuitiva.
Listo,
Sí,
profe. La tengo
listo,
como tener en
perfecto.
cuenta porque si quiero estar, por ejemplo, casi estoy experta ya pero si quisiera como explorar más herramientas.
Claro que sí. De todas maneras, si yo encuentro la información, porque yo por ahí tengo información sobre diferentes aplicaciones, yo te la enviaría por el
Sí.
Teams.
Ah, perfecto, profe. Perfecto, muchas
¿Listo?
gracias.
Ok. Entonces, te
Profe,
pido el
otra
favor,
pregunta. Sí,
sí, te pido el favor, me escribas al Teams recordándome lo de las aplicaciones para trabajo interactivo y así yo te respondo con mayor eficacia.
listo, listo, profe. Ya le voy a generar el mensaje.
Bien,
Muchas gracias.
ok,
Profe,
cuéntame.
otra duda que tengo es, nosotros estamos manejando las normas APA, ¿cierto? Al 1.5, pero en el trabajo final también se va a utilizar al 1.5.
Sí, las normas APA las utilizamos al 1.5 con la indentación de los párrafos, teniendo en cuenta que la primera página, la página del cover page, los nombres ya no van de manera vertical, sino de manera horizontal. Como es un trabajo grupal, entonces van a poner sus nombres divididos por comas de manera horizontal.
Ok,
Igual vamos a utilizar French indentation, todo lo mismo.
listo, profe, perfecto. Profe, muchas gracias. Tenía como esas duditas.
Bueno, me alegra mucho que las pudimos solucionar.
Listo, profe,
Ahora,
muchísimas gracias, señora.
con mucho gusto, voy a compartir mi pantalla para,
Ujú,
para empezar entonces con la información que les traigo el día de hoy. Permíteme
sí,
un momento. Mm, ¿Dónde está? Un momento. Ah, y- Ok, listo. Me avisas si estás viendo mi pantalla, por favor.
perfecto, profe.
Ok. Regálame un segundo que no puedo mover este cosito de aquí. Ya. Ahora sí, lo voy a poner grandecito. Okay, so we are going to start with the presentation and and this is unit 3, step 4, the one that we're working on. Okay.
Yes.
So the purpose for this task is to be able to criticize the curricular models that we have, that we see in light of these new theories and methodologies and of the contextual needs of our students in the English curriculum. So when we think about criticizing the curricular models is doing a lot of reflective thinking as to how we can improve these different scenarios. So ever since the initiation of school itself, there has always been a lot of discussions on curriculum. We've been working on how we can implement it, what is the best thing to do, how can the role of the student be more active, how can we help the student? All these discussions have been happening for a very long, long time. And as argued by Sogmanidata, curriculum is the core of the whole educational process. We've already talked about this throughout our course. We have read different authors who told us that this process is important because it becomes the guide of all the educational goals. If we don't have a proper guide, then we will end up with educational problems when it comes to curriculum or the classes themselves. So continuing on, if we think about Morris, Morris observes that schools are organizations and they develop a culture, ethics, or an environment which might be favorable or unfavorable to encouraging change and the implementation of innovation. So with this, the author is mentioning that these school environments are places where students can develop a culture of studying and learning favorably or not so much. So depending on the environment that we create with the curriculum in a specific school or learning place, we will be able to encourage change and also implement different innovations that can help us transform this school environment. The goal is always transforming. And when I talk about innovation, I don't mean creating new things. Innovation can also be improving existing strategies or existing methodologies that are already present in the environment that we have our students or the environment that we work or that we wish to work. So, for example, sorry, we're talking about how can we create this successful curriculum? How could we create it? Because it becomes necessary to consider the actors within this construct. The curriculum is constructed by the teachers, the administratives, by the students, by all the mediators that are out there. So we need to make sure that we consider these actors who are very important in the situation analysis. The possibilities of changing a teaching program or implementing different things to meet the students' needs, it's important to also consider those as key so that the students can keep their own identity. When we consider our students within this process of reteaching, of this new environment, which we are going to call teaching and learning, because remember that us mediators are not only there to teach, we are there to also learn with our students as we move in the process. And we need to promote their identity. The same that we need to promote their agency for them to be able to work by themselves, to take accountability for their learning process. The same way, we need to help or aid their identity within the teaching and learning process. So we see different issues that we may have just to be able to either implement or to create a new curriculum. So there are issues such as how can I help the students keep their identity, promote their agency, but also there are institutions difficulties that we may consider. And when we have these institutional difficulties, sometimes and generally they happen when there is not enough commitment from not only the teachers, but also the administrative part. Sometimes we want to implement strategies, we want to make changes in the curriculum, but the administrators, they say, no, this is the way that it's always been done. We need to stay here in this particular curriculum. We cannot change it. So that is another issue that we may encounter when we are trying to implement a new curriculum. It can also hinder the updating of the curricula because updating a curricula is difficult to do, requires commitment and time. And if it's not done this issue can hinder the importance of the curricula to keep the realities within the school or what the students need to learn. So when we are implementing a new curricular, the students demand certain needs. And most importantly, the teachers need to be skilled and trained. We cannot just go and implement a curriculum out of nowhere. We need to be sure what we are doing, considering the students, considering the actors, and considering what the authors tell us. The authors tell us that we need to, let's go back here for a moment. The authors tell us that we need to develop a culture, an environment. So how can we create a culture of learning a foreign language, in this case English, in, in a school by improving the curricula? So thinking about curriculum, we have many chances to make changes. However, there are also some difficulties. As teaching is evolving, we also demand reevaluation of models and approaches, because as we teach languages, society is changing, the students are changing, their needs are changing. So we need to embrace contemporary methodologies, integrate technology, address cultural diversity, foster interdisciplinary connections, rethink assessment practices, and invest in teacher professional development. So these, what you guys are doing by taking these masters that focus on the mediation of the learning of English, is important for you to take with you that as we move forward and opportunities come to us, we need to be prepared to serve the students through the challenges and new opportunities that we have. So I have colored these words right here. I have colored these steps because these are important for us to keep in mind, to always keep in check. How am I embracing contemporary methodologies? How am I integrating technology? Sometimes integrating technology is not only giving them a Kahoot or giving them a platform. Integrating technology for learning means that I integrate the technology, but I have a pedagogical purpose behind it. If I don't have a pedagogical purpose behind my educational actions, then the purpose is lost. We need to address cultural diversity. Now more than ever, we have very diverse classrooms. So that needs to be addressed. As we English teachers know, and also all foreign languages teachers know, the language does not come by itself. Language is not only codes, language is also culture. So when we are addressing cultural diversity, we are fostering these connections with our students. How are we assessing them? Are we assessing them just to get a grade, or are we assessing them so that they can use the assessment to improve? The assessment should be a tool for improvement. The assessment should be this one specific act in the teaching process where the student can rethink what he's been doing right or what he's been doing wrong. The assessment cannot be seen as a punishment, as sometimes is taken in different places. So when we talk about technology integration, there is a critique behind it. So some schools, they just decide that they're not going to incorporate technology, or maybe they just leave it behind a little because they lack resources, or they don't have learning apps or things like that. However, when we leave behind incorporating technology effectively, we are not aiding the students' process. Technology can be used for students' engagement and to enhance the opportunities of learning. We can also use it for online cooperation, and there are now with artificial intelligence, there are many learning apps that can also be used to enhance this experience. We can help the student learn not only in the classroom. The goal is to also create opportunities for him or her to learn and to be in touch with what we want him to learn outside the classroom. How else could we do it? Through technology. So the recommendation that they give us is to integrate technology as a language learning tool and provide students with authentic online material. Authentic online material means using blogs, using series maybe, using podcasts, using video games even. Maybe we could use songs, any authentic online material that we can find. And authentic online material is material that is not meant for teaching English, that was created only for native speakers, like a magazine or like a newspaper, something that is a documentary, something that is created only for native speakers. So the purpose of that particular thing that I want to use in class is not to learn English per se, but is to use it as a bridge to improve language. Okay. Another interactive platforms that we could use, well, there are many out there. Which ones? It depends on the student's age. If we have youngsters, then can use something that maybe we could use Educa Play or things that are for children. If we have adults, then maybe we could recommend Duolingo, or we can use, there is one app that I recommend that is called Sesame app that is good for speaking. Sesame app. Sesame. Sesame app is good for speaking. You are able to speak with Nia, with an AI. You speak with it and you can just interact as if you were interacting with a native speaker. So those types of platforms are very useful for our students so that we can create opportunities for them to learn outside the classroom, so that they can learn in a real world language use. Yes, we do need to make drills and all those things that we use in class. They are very useful. However, we need to also expose them to this real world part of the language, because in the end, when they in the end, when they're going to use the language itself, they're going to use it with native speakers or with other speakers whose native language is not Spanish. So they must use English as a bridge of communication. To continue now, we can think about traditional versus contemporary approaches. So when we were looking at the information and we think of traditional versus contemporary, we think of many teachers that they still adhere to traditional methods, focusing on grammar and memorization. Unfortunately, it's still happening, and this neglects the communicative aspect. The language is learned to be able to communicate. We need to learn to communicate. That is the main purpose. Now we do not focus so much on how well you pronounce, how perfect is your grammar. What we need is for our students to communicate with one another, to be able to convey a message and understand the message. So the recommendation is to embrace these new contemporary methodologies such as communicative language teaching. Task-based learning is fantastic. Task-based learning is fantastic for students to do cooperative learning. While they learn cooperatively, they are focused on finishing one task. So these will foster practical language, right? So when we teach them practical language, it aligns better with the real world, not so much as artificial conversations, but rather things that they can see as meaningful. So consider contemporary approaches and try to always look for a communicative language teaching process. When we talk about culture, I was talking to you about culture a few minutes ago, and sometimes we tend to not address diverse cultural and linguistic backgrounds of students. We cannot assume that in one way they are all the same because they all have different backgrounds. If we teach in a classroom in Colombia, we may have Venezuelan students. We may have indigenous people in the classroom. We may even have students from other departments, from different departments. And Colombia it's quite big, and we are a multicultural country. We are very diverse. How can we bring that into the classroom? So we need to develop the curricula to incorporate diverse voices, literature, cultural contexts. This helps the students relate to what they are studying. If I show my students only New York and the Statue of Liberty, and I only show them the Big Ben, they are missing out on the opportunity of seeing how big the world is. And in so many places, they speak this language that I am learning, in this case, English. So the recommendation is to always, when we are thinking about developing a curricula, after we think about making the student the center of the classroom, and we think about combating traditional versus contemporary approaches, we also need to include technology and consider cultural relevance. Cultural relevance helps the students foster deeper understanding and appreciation of the English language. So they're not going to see it only as a subject, because English is not a subject. English is a skill for life. So if I am able to teach my students to understand the cultural aspect behind the language itself, I will be able to take them a little bit further. Once they appreciate what they are learning, they will have more opportunities to become closer to what they are actually learning. So, the assessment practices. And the critique is that many curricula heavily rely on traditional assessment methods, standardized testing, looking at their proficiency, right? And maybe checking the ability of the students to interact in real life situations. However, how can we implement a variety of assessment methods? The same way that we were talking about task-based learning, we can implement a project-based assessment. Portfolios. Portfolios will help our students to create a memory as they learn. So when they look at their portfolio, they could see where they began and where they are standing now at the moment they are looking at the portfolio. Performance assessments, not only for them to get something right, to get the grammar right, to have everything perfect. We need them to be able we need to be able to measure their language abilities through other processes different than a standardized test. How do we do that? How can we do it? That is the challenge. The challenge is to include a type of assessment that can measure the students' language abilities without being a test. How can we measure our students' knowledge? Finally, we have professional development for teachers, which the the general critique is that there isn't enough training for teachers in these new methodologies, or is not adequate, or the teachers do not take advantage of these spaces, and this hinders the implementation of updated curricular models. You may have an updated curricular model in a particular school, but if the teachers are not trained on it and they're not on board, then we won't be successful. So the curriculum by itself does nothing if the community is not involved and committed to implementing it. So always the recommendations is to invest in ongoing professional development. And you are doing it so right now. At this moment, you are taking a master's program. And make sure that you are always up to date and you are skilled to implement innovative teaching methods and technologies. When we prepare for these different scenarios, we are able to fulfill the students' needs and the schools as well. So all these recommendations and critiques that I have given today, I have taken them from the different authors that we worked on for this task. And at this moment, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I just want to say if you have any questions, if there's anything I can help you with, maybe something was not clear, or it's all good to you, Veronica.
Profe, en la última presentación se te fue el audio completamente. ¿Estás ahí?
Sí, aquí estoy. Te voy a volver a presentar
Sí.
a hacer la presentación. El último slide,
Sí, sí, la última página, solo la última, profe, el último
¿sí?
texto, el último párrafo.
Las recomendaciones.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Bien. I said that investing in ongoing professional development for teachers will ensure that you can be equipped to help your students and to implement new technologies, to be innovative, and to have the knowledge and skills to implement a new curriculum in your institution or in your classroom or wherever it is that your learning environment may be. So a teacher who needs to always be investing in his professional development is responsible for him and his students. Okay, did you hear me better?
Thank you, teacher. Perfecto. Muchísimas gracias.
Ok, muy bien. Entonces voy a prender la cámara porque ya casi terminamos, así ya no me roba internet. Gracias por haberme
Sí.
acompañado hoy. Espero que haya sido útil para ti y para los que miren la grabación. Seguimos trabajando. La actividad está para entregar el 24 y entonces ya entramos a la fase final de nuestro curso para descansar un poco, tomar fuerzas y volver a empezar en febrero.
Así será, profe. La verdad, yo he estado muy contenta con la maestría. He aprendido muchísimo y he aprendido de herramientas, de teoría. Ha sido muy constructivo.
Me alegra mucho que te sientas así y que hayas aprendido todas estas nuevas líneas que te puedan ayudar para mejorar tu profesionalismo y también pues a tus estudiantes, que finalmente por ellos es que uno hace todas estas cosas que hace.
Sí,
Sí,
tienes toda la razón. Son ellos los protagonistas.
totalmente. Que pases buena noche y nos vemos pronto. Por
Que
favor,
estés muy bien,
recuerda,
profe.
recuerda escribirme a Teams para enviarte la info.
Y profe, ya voy a buscarte para solicitarte. Muchísimas gracias.